Hey everyone. Welcome to AfriHeart Stories, your go-to spot for African tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe and drop a comment. Now sit back and enjoy. The Ease mansion in Lekki was a symbol of power, wealth and legacy. Gold-framed portraits of ancestors lined the walls, chandeliers sparkled from high ceilings, and the scent of jollof rice and grilled goat wafted through the air. It was the kind of evening where tradition draped itself in expensive igbadas and geli head wraps. Chief Damien Ease had summoned the entire family for what he described as a defining moment for the Ease legacy. Edaora Ease stood in the corner of the massive sitting room, her figure graceful and understated in a simple cream blouse and navy skirt. Her presence was quiet, almost ghost-like amidst the noise and clinking glasses. She knew this was a formality. The family had long made her an outsider. She watched as her cousin Chima strutted through the crowd, laughing loudly, throwing handshakes like confetti. He wore a white kaftan with golden embroidery, a matching cap tilted proudly on his head. He basked in the glow of every compliment, every nod. She wasn't jealous, just observant. Chief Damien rose from his velvet seat at the head of the table and clapped twice. The murmurs settled. "My brothers, sisters, children, and elders of this noble house," he began, his voice rich and commanding. "Today we mark a new chapter. I am proud to announce that Chima Ease will be taking on more responsibilities in the family enterprise." Applause erupted. Some rose to their feet. "He will lead the expansion into our new oil logistics contract with confidence and strategy." Edaora blinked. The oil logistics contract had been her idea. She'd done the groundwork. She had the spreadsheets, contacts, and analysis to prove it. "Excuse me, Daddy," she said, her voice cutting gently through the noise. It was the first time she had spoken all evening. The room fell still. Chief Damien looked up, startled. "What is it?" "The contract. Was my research. Chima hasn't even attended the stakeholder meetings." Chima smirked, folding his arms. "Edaora, don't embarrass yourself." "I'm not embarrassed," she replied, locking eyes with her father. "But this isn't fair. And it certainly isn't right." Chief Damien rose to his feet slowly, each second stretching like a warning. "Do you hear yourself? In front of the elders? Do you think it's your place to challenge me over business matters?" Edaora didn't flinch. "I think it's my place to ask why my hard work is being erased." Silence. Then Chief Damien's voice turned thunderous. "You are a disgrace to this family." The insult echoed off the marble walls. Gasps slipped from aunts and uncles. Ngozi Ease, Edaora's mother, shrank in her seat, face pale. "You will not shame me. Not in my house, not under my roof. Get out." Edaora looked around the room, hoping for just one person to stand with her. Nothing. Only silence and downcast eyes. She turned to leave, her heels clicking on the polished floor like a drumbeat of defiance. As she passed her mother, she paused. "Mom?" Ngozi raised her eyes but said nothing. "Okay," Edaora whispered. "Then I guess I go alone." She walked out of the mansion, her head high, heart broken, and spine steel. Outside, the evening air was thick with humidity. The driver had already been dismissed. She took off her heels and walked barefoot down the long driveway, lit only by moonlight. Back inside the house, the chatter resumed slowly, awkwardly. "She's always been too headstrong," someone murmured. "She'll be back when she learns humility," another added. But Chief Damien sat back down with a hard face. Deep down he knew something shifted that night. But pride wouldn't let him say it. Across town, Edaora finally reached her small apartment. She entered, closed the door and locked it. Then she stood in silence, the night pressing against her skin like a second betrayal. She didn't cry. Not yet. She simply took a deep breath, opened her laptop and pulled up the contract files. "They want a disgrace?" she whispered. "Fine. Let them watch one rise." The air in Edaora's apartment was still, heavy with disappointment. She sat at the edge of her bed, laptop open, the blue light casting shadows across her face. The words her father had thrown at her, "disgrace," looped in her head like a haunting tune. Her phone buzzed but she didn't look at it. She already knew the messages would be worse than the silence. The betrayal wasn't just from her father. It was the collective cowardice of every aunt, uncle, cousin, and even her own mother. Not one voice had spoken for her. She had stood alone. And now she would rise alone. Later that night there was a gentle knock at her door. Edaora opened it to find her mother standing there, scarf drawn tightly around her head. She looked nervous, eyes darting down the hallway. "May I come in?" Ngozi asked, voice low. Edaora stepped aside. "I was wondering if you would." They sat in the dim living room. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock. I should have said something, Ngozi began. Her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her wrapper. But your father, he was furious. I couldn't risk. Risk what, Mama? Me? Adaora asked, her voice level but laced with pain. Ngozi looked away. You don't understand. No, I do, Adaora replied. You chose him. Again. And it hurt more than his words. Ngozi's eyes welled with tears. I didn't come to justify. I just needed you to know I saw what they did and it was wrong. Adaora stared at her for a long moment. Then she nodded. Thank you, she whispered. But I won't be coming back. Ngozi left quietly and Adaora packed a small bag. She wasn't sure where she would go yet, but anywhere was better than under the shadow of that house. By morning the storm had spread. Gossip among business circles trickled fast. Clients grew cold. One by one, Adaora's calls went unanswered. At her workplace, HR called her in. Adaora, we've been informed about the situation involving your family, her manager said awkwardly. And with the current scandal around the Ease enterprise, we believe it's best to suspend your consultancy contract for now. She didn't argue. She stood, shook hands, and left with her pride intact. By dusk she had lost everything. No job. No support. No future lined up. She scrolled through her contacts until she landed on one name, Grandma MMA. Though her grandmother had passed years ago, the old woman's village home still stood in Enugu, tucked behind thick mango trees and bordered by red earth roads. It wasn't much, but it was safe. She boarded a night bus. By morning she stood in front of the rusty gate. Wildflowers had grown along the fence. She walked in, brushed dust off the porch, and unlocked the door with the spare key Grandma MMA always kept under a broken clay pot. Inside she found silence and memories. She opened the wooden chest in the corner and pulled out old journals filled with Grandma's thoughts, parables, and prayers. One line stood out, "They may silence your name but not your light." Adaora lit a candle, sat at the small table and whispered, "Let's start again." Life in the village was humble. Mornings began with fetching water. Afternoons were spent helping the women organize produce for sale. Adaora offered to teach the younger girls how to use a donated desktop computer at the local hall. Word spread. Soon, every evening she had 20 girls eager to learn coding basics and business literacy. One Saturday, a woman named Nkechi from a local NGO visited the community. She observed the class quietly, took photos, and asked a few questions. "Who trained you?" Nkechi asked. Adaora smiled. "No one. I just wanted them to have what I wish I had growing up." A few weeks later, Nkechi called. "We're hosting a pitch event in Abuja. Women leading rural impact projects. I nominated you. You've been shortlisted." Adaora paused. "Are you sure? I have nothing to wear, no funds to travel. The foundation will sponsor your trip. All you need is your vision." That night she stood outside under the stars. "Grandma, I don't know what this is yet. But I'll walk through it with faith." 2 days before the Abuja trip, the village buzzed. News had spread that the girl from the Ease family was traveling for a national conference. Some whispered, others cheered. Then a black SUV pulled into the dusty road. Adaora squinted, unsure. From the car stepped a tall, dark-skinned man in jeans and a buttoned shirt. "Kelvin?" she asked, stunned. "Adaora?" he smiled, spreading his arms. Kelvin Asika had been her seat partner in secondary school. He had left for the UK after their WAEC exams. Now he looked grown, composed, and confident. "I saw your name in the nomination list for the pitch event. I couldn't believe it, so I came to see for myself." They sat under a mango tree catching up. "You're working in tech now?" she asked. "I co-run an innovation fund," he said. "But what you're doing here? This is the real impact. Adaora, your story, it matters." She lowered her eyes. "They called it disgrace." "Let them," Kelvin said. "It takes disgrace to grow grace." He offered to coach her for the pitch. "Let me mentor you through this," he said. "No strings. Just someone who believes in you." Adaora nodded, a little tear slipping down her cheek. For the first time in weeks she didn't feel so alone. Together, they began building the foundation of something that would soon shake everything her family once held dear. Back in Lagos, the cracks were showing. Chima Ease, newly appointed as the family's heir to the business, was floundering. The oil logistics contract, the one Adaora had meticulously built, was falling apart. Deadlines were missed, supplies mismanaged, and worst of all, whispers of bribery and unethical practices began making their rounds in government circles. Chief Damien sat at the head of his mahogany desk, massaging his temples. How can something so straightforward turn into a disaster? Chima shrugged. Not my fault, those vendors are unreliable. They probably pulled out because of that foolish girl stirring attention in the media. Damien slammed his fist on the desk. Enough about Adaora. Handle this, Chima. We are Ises. We don't collapse. But the bleeding had begun. The company began losing smaller contracts. Trusted clients suddenly turned cold. Behind closed doors, board members started questioning the decision to sideline Adaora. One director, Mr. Uche, leaned over to his colleague and whispered, "We called her a disgrace, but she might be the only one who had sense." Meanwhile, in the quiet village, Adaora rehearsed for her pitch with Kelvin. Her slides were minimal, her words honest. "You don't need to be flashy," Kelvin told her. "You just need to be you." The pitch event in Abuja was held in a glass building overlooking the city skyline. As Adaora stepped onto the stage, her hands trembled slightly. Her cream blouse and Ankara skirt were simple, but she wore them with pride. The judges looked serious, pens poised. "Good afternoon. My name is Adaora Ease. I come from a small village in Enugu. Today I want to talk about education, not just in schools, but in communities that the world forgets." She clicked through her slides showing photos of young girls learning tech, building small apps, drafting business ideas. "We don't need saviors. We need partners. We don't need charity. We need capital." The room was silent. Then came the applause. One of the judges, a stern woman in a navy suit, stood. "Your clarity, your vision, it's powerful. I vote yes." One by one, the panel echoed the sentiment. Adaora left the stage dazed. Within hours, the video of her pitch went viral. The hashtag graceful disgrace trended across platforms. The Ease mansion was unusually quiet. Damien stared at the television as Adaora's clip played on national news. The headline read, "Disowned Daughter Redefines Legacy." He scoffed. "So she teaches village girls how to play with computers? That's not business." Ngozi sat beside him, silent. "She's building something bigger than we thought," she finally said. "Let her play with it. This family doesn't need pity points." Meanwhile, in Enugu, Adaora met with Kelvin and a few donors. "We're officially launching the MMA Foundation," she announced. "Named after the woman who taught me dignity." She secured funding for a permanent tech hub in the village and mentorship programs across rural Nigeria. "You're doing it," Kelvin said softly one evening. "They threw you out, but you're building an empire." "And this time," she replied, "I'll make sure no girl ever gets called a disgrace for speaking the truth." Ngozi couldn't sleep. The news coverage, the interviews, the praise for Adaora, it haunted her. But not because she was jealous. Because she was ashamed. She took a secret trip back to the village, arriving unannounced. Adaora looked stunned to see her mother standing at the gate. "Mom? Can I come in?" They sat on the porch as the evening sun dipped below the mango trees. "You're doing amazing things," Ngozi whispered. "The whole country sees it." Adaora said nothing. "I failed you," her mother continued, tears spilling. "I sat silent when I should have fought. I watched you walk out alone." Adaora took a deep breath. "I forgave you long ago. But I had to learn not to wait for your voice to find mine." "I want to be in your life again," Ngozi said. "If you'll have me, then come on your own terms. Not as Chief Damien's wife. As my mother." Ngozi nodded. For once, she looked like a woman unburdened. Weeks later, Adaora received an official letter. The MMA Foundation had won the International Women in Impact Award. She was to be flown to Nairobi for the ceremony. Several sponsors were eager to invest in rural education across West Africa, and they chose her foundation to anchor it. But there was more. One of the main sponsors, Unity Tech, was previously one of the Ease family's largest corporate partners. Adaora scanned the letter again. The sponsorship shift wasn't just professional. It was symbolic. "They're pulling out from Ease Holdings?" Kelvin asked. Apparently, Unity Tech no longer trusts Chima's leadership. At a board meeting back in Lagos, Chief Damien slammed the letter on the table. "This is sabotage. They gave my daughter a pity award and now they're canceling us." "It's not sabotage, sir," Uche said calmly. "It's vision. And she has it." Chief Damien stared at the boardroom window. He saw the beginning of his empire's unraveling. Across the ocean, Adaora stood in front of an auditorium in Nairobi, accepting her award with a humble smile. "We build legacies not by inheritance but by intention," she said. The audience stood clapping. And somewhere deep inside, Adaora knew, the comeback had begun. The Ease family name had once commanded immediate respect. But now, whispers echoed in boardrooms, gala events, and ministry offices. Adora's rise had cast a light on everything Chief Damien tried to keep hidden. It began with a leaked audit report, questionable expenditures under Chima's oversight, missing invoices and vendor kickbacks. Then came the government's quiet withdrawal from a lucrative land contract. In the boardroom, Chief Damien paced. "This is a phase. We will fix this." But the board was restless. "Chief," one director said gently, "our investors are alarmed. The media's focus on Adoora is making our leadership look outdated." Chima slammed a file shut. "You people are spineless. She's nothing but a glorified charity worker." "Charity doesn't pull international sponsors, Chima," someone muttered. Damien turned slowly. "Find a solution. Now, before this house crumbles." Adoora sat in her Enugu office when an envelope arrived. Inside was a card embossed with the Ease family crest. A dinner invitation. From her father. Kelvin read over her shoulder. "You don't have to go." "I know," she replied. "But I want them to see what silence built." Before the dinner, she made a quiet move. Through the MMA Foundation's holding company, she purchased the lease on a prime Ease-owned Lagos property. The one they had once mocked her in front of. She printed the documents and placed them in her clutch. "Let's give them a night to remember," she said to Kelvin as they flew into Lagos. The Ease mansion was aglow again, just like the night they had cast her out. But this time, Adoora stepped out of a black car, her name whispered as she entered. Relatives sat awkwardly. Some avoided her gaze. Chief Damien stood at the head of the table. "Adoora," he said, trying to smile, "you've done well. It's time to put the past behind us and return home." Adoora looked around the table. "You mean back to the same place that shamed me for speaking the truth?" Chima scoffed. "Can't you ever let things go?" She reached into her clutch, pulled out the documents and laid them on the table. "This property? It's mine now. Leased to MMA Holdings. The board already signed." "You didn't know?" Gasp. Confusion. Adoora leaned forward. "I never left the family. The family left me." Kelvin placed a firm hand on her shoulder. Silence roared. Chima exploded. "You think you're better than all of us? You're still a nobody." He rose suddenly, hand raised. But before he could reach Adoora, Kelvin stepped in. "Touch her," he said in a cold, measured voice, "and I will make sure your name disappears from every investor table on this continent." Chima froze. Chief Damien's mouth opened, but no words came out. Adoora rose slowly. "This was never about revenge. It was about truth. And I came tonight not to return, but to remind you that disgrace doesn't define a person." As she turned to leave, Ngozi quietly stood and followed. Weeks passed. The MMA Foundation officially moved its Lagos branch into the former Ease property. A new gate was installed. A new name engraved. MMA Women's Innovation Center. And beside it, a painted mural of Grandma MMA smiling with her arms open. Adoora stood before the wall on launch day, dozens of young girls in uniforms cheering. Sponsors and community leaders filled the grounds. She gave a speech. "This building once hosted silence, shame, and shadows. Today it welcomes light. Our daughters won't be told to hush. They'll be taught to lead." The crowd erupted in applause. Behind the scenes, the MMA name was becoming a movement. NGOs aligned. Private companies donated. Government programs requested partnerships. Adoora's name was now more than a comeback. It was a legacy. And the mansion that once dismissed her? Now overlooked by a center louder than any insult ever thrown. The press conference was meant to be a simple event announcing MMA Foundation's newest scholarship initiative. But as Adoora stood beside Kelvin, Ngozi surprised everyone. She stepped up to the podium unannounced, her voice trembling but clear. "My name is Ngozi Ease. I am the mother of the woman you celebrate today. And I have something to confess." Cameras turned. Reporters scribbled. Adoora's eyes widened. "Years ago, I sat in silence as my daughter was cast out. I chose fear over truth. I let tradition silence me. But today I reclaim my voice. And I stand with her." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then the room erupted in applause. Later, when they were alone, Adoora looked at her mother with quiet gratitude. "I didn't ask you to do that." "I know," Ngozi said, wiping her eyes. "But it was time. Not for forgiveness, but for healing." Adoora nodded. "Forgiveness isn't for cameras. It's for peace. And I think I'm ready." The media didn't spare Chief Damien. Within days of Ngozi's revelation, an investigative report exposed a decade-long pattern of corruption in Ease Holdings, centered around Chima. News outlets ran headlines like, "From Patriarch to Pariah, the fall of Chief Damien Ease. Clients severed ties. A government task force was formed. And investors began demanding accountability." Damien tried to issue a statement, calling it all a coordinated smear campaign led by his estranged daughter. But the public wasn't buying it. His press release was flooded with responses. "She rose. You crumbled. Your disgrace made her grace visible." At a shareholder meeting, Uche, the once loyal board member, stood up. "With respect, Chief, your leadership no longer serves this company. It was the end of an era." Ada Ora stood before a glittering audience at the Global Women's Leadership Gala in Cape Town. Kelvin watched proudly from the front row, flanked by ministers, CEOs, and international partners. The large screen behind her displayed the MMA Foundation's journey, from a dusty village classroom to a continent-wide movement. "When they called me a disgrace," Ada Ora began, "I believed them. But disgrace was the soil in which I found my roots." The crowd leaned in. "We spend so much time trying to fit into rooms that were never built for us. Sometimes being thrown out is the best gift, because it forces you to build your own room and open the door for others." She paused, her voice softening. "To every girl who's ever been silenced, shamed, or dismissed, I see you. I was you. And I promise, your story doesn't end in disgrace. It begins there." Tears welled up in the eyes of women across the room. The audience rose in a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. As Ada Ora walked off stage, Kelvin met her at the wings. "You were born for this," he whispered. She smiled, holding back tears. "I was made by it." Rain drizzled over Lagos, cloaking the city in a soft, gray hush. At the MMA Women's Innovation Center, the staff moved briskly, prepping for a conference. Inside Ada Ora's office, the air was fragrant with jasmine tea and paper. She reviewed a proposal when her assistant gently knocked. "Ma? There's someone here asking to see you." He didn't make an appointment. Ada Ora looked up. "Who is it?" The assistant hesitated. "Your father." Ada Ora's heart paused, then resumed its beat, slower this time. She stared out the window for a moment. "Send him in." A few minutes later, Chief Damien Ease walked in, smaller than she remembered. Time had pressed his once proud frame inward. His agbada looked heavy, like the past clung to him in every fold. "Ada Ora," he said, almost breathless. She didn't stand. "Please have a seat." He sat across from her, eyes scanning the room. Photos of Ada Ora with young women in Kenya, Ghana, Rwanda. A large painting of Grandma MMA behind her desk. The nameplate read, Ada Ora Ease, Executive Director. "I didn't come to beg," he began, voice low. "I came because I had to look you in the eye. One last time." She folded her hands on the table. "Go on. I've lost everything. The business, the respect. Even Chima is hiding in London, under investigation. Your mother doesn't speak to me unless necessary." Ada Ora said nothing. "But the part one can't live with is you. The way I treated you. I see you on TV. I read your speeches. I remember the night you walked out barefoot. I told myself I was right. That I was protecting tradition." His voice broke. "But I was just protecting my pride. I was wrong. You were the only one brave enough to speak up. And I crushed you for it." Ada Ora's eyes shimmered, but her face remained composed. "You didn't crush me. You redirected me." Damien looked up slowly. "That's even worse." She leaned forward. "Why are you here now?" He reached into his bag and pulled out an old photo. One of Ada Ora at 10 years old, smiling at her first school award ceremony. "To say goodbye. Not because I'm dying, but because I know I no longer belong in your life. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. Not for sympathy. Just truth." Silence held them for a long moment. Ada Ora finally stood. "You don't get access to me anymore. That door is closed." Damien nodded, standing slowly. "I understand." She walked him to the door. "But I do hope you heal," she added, "because you were my father. And I'll always honor that history." His eyes filled. "Thank you." As he walked out into the rain, she returned to her desk, closed the folder on her proposal, and whispered, "Goodbye, Papa." Outside, the storm strengthened. But inside Ada Ora's office, the peace was absolute. 10 years later. A bright harmattan breeze swept through the wide gates of the newly renamed MMA Ease University for Women and Innovation. It was a day of celebration. Dignitaries, students, media houses and community members had gathered to honor a legacy born not of privilege, but of perseverance. At the entrance stood a towering mural, a young Adaora holding the hand of her grandmother, Grandma MMA. Behind them, faceless girls ascended a staircase of books, light streaming from above. It had become a national symbol of what was possible when a woman refuses to stay silent. Inside the main auditorium, Adaora, now 38, dressed in a flowing emerald green gown with gold embroidery, stood at the podium. Her locks were pulled back in a regal bun, and her voice carried the calm authority of someone who had weathered many storms. "Today isn't about me," she began, eyes scanning the sea of young faces. "It's about what happens when a single voice says, 'Enough.' When one woman decides disgrace isn't the end of her story, but the beginning." The crowd listened, breath held. "I stand here not because I was welcomed but because I was rejected. Not because I was empowered but because I was shamed. I know what it feels like to be told you don't belong, to be called a failure in rooms where your ideas were stolen." She paused. "And yet here we are. In a place built from that very rejection." Applause thundered. Young girls held up signs with words like courage, grace, and legacy. Kelvin, now her husband and partner in MMA Global, stood with their 2 children in the front row, 6-year-old MMA and 9-year-old Afani. Beside them, Ngozi Ease dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, her heart full of pride. After the speech, the honorary ribbon cutting for the new tech lab began. It was a state-of-the-art space funded by partners from Silicon Valley and Nairobi alike. Adaora's vision had gone far beyond Enugu. Her reach was continental. A little girl tugged at Adaora's dress. "Auntie Ada, is it true they called you a disgrace before?" Adaora knelt down, smiling. "Yes, they did." "Were you sad?" She touched the girl's chin. "Yes. But sadness is like rain. It waters the seeds. And eventually those seeds grow into something strong." The girl beamed, then ran off to her friends. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the campus rooftops, Adaora walked quietly toward the mural. She ran her fingers along the painted hands of Grandma MMA. "We did it, Grandma," she whispered. Not loudly. Not with revenge. But with purpose. Behind her, Kelvin approached, wrapping his arms around her waist. "There's someone here to see you," he said gently. She turned. Standing a few feet away was Chima, now older, less arrogant, dressed modestly in a simple shirt and trousers. He had aged. "Adaora," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" She studied him. The pain he'd caused couldn't be erased. But something in his eyes was different. "Not today," she said kindly. "But maybe someday." He nodded. "I understand. And I'm sorry. Truly." He turned to leave and Adaora didn't stop him. Forgiveness would come in its own time. She looked up at the stars blinking into the twilight. Her children ran past, laughing. Ngozi sat on a bench with other community mothers, telling stories of Adaora's childhood. And Adaora stood in the heart of it all, not just the daughter who had once been called a disgrace, but the woman who had turned disgrace into legacy. A reporter approached. "One final question, Ms. Ease. How do you want to be remembered?" She smiled. As the girl they pushed out, who built a door so others could walk in. The cameras clicked. Fade to black. And the world, forever, remembered her not for how she was shamed, but for how she rose. Liked it? Thumbs up, subscribe and join the AfriHeart fam. Your support fuels our stories. Until next time.